In episode 3, Jack recognizes the faces of the other assassination targets, claiming he never knew their names. I initially thought that these individuals were the ones that orchestrated the transport of the Scottish orphans. Maybe Jack was the one who came up with or okayed the order to do this, and these three were the ones who carried it out. Yet, it seems to be that the opposite is true, in that Jack was the middleman tasked with delivering the children. I understand that the show is trying to equalize the status of Jack Harkness and John Frobisher by doing this, but I'm not entirely sure it adds up for this long-standing character. Let's bear in mind that we don't have a lot to go on when it comes to cataloguing what precisely Jack was up to in the 20th century. In the episode Fragments, he's shown as Torchwood's lackey in 1899, followed by a brief montage of him photographed in uniform, and then it's 1999 and all his team have been killed. He is quoted in the Doctor Who Series 3 finale as being a soldier in both world wars, and apparently has a fling with somebody in the 20th century depicted in the 4th series of Torchwood. When exactly he goes from lackey to top dog in Torchwood over the course of 100 years is never made clear from his TV appearances, so showing him as merely paid to follow orders for 65 years feels a bit off.
What, in case the aliens are hostile? You need someone who can't die?
Actually, we need someone who doesn't care.
Doesn't care? What? What dark path was Jack on in the 1960s? I was disappointed to find that the named characters on the hit list weren't turned into characters in the flashbacks. I initially assumed this female character we meet is Ellen Hunt, but when lined up next to this briefly shown photograph of her, these are definitely two different people. We see numerous soldiers assisting with the operation, making me wonder if any of them had to be culled during the blank page order also. When we see it was Jack who did most of the legwork, this nullifies the significance of these other characters in the build-up to this flashback. I did find this idea of preventing millions of deaths in exchange for 12 children to be fascinating though.
It's a brand new strain of Indonesian flu. They claim it could kill up to 25 million people. All our research seems to back up their figures.
It made me wonder if the UK government were offered the COVID vaccination back in 2019 for some kind of sacrificial bargain. Would they have taken it? Unfortunately, the execution of this idea that Jack acts like the Pied Piper of Hamelin makes for an astoundingly unbelievable sequence. How do you simply convince 12 orphans to get on a bus in the middle of the night with nothing but the promise of adventure?
You just come with Uncle Jack. We're gonna go on an adventure, yeah? Here we go. All right, children, you follow me. Adventure.
You didn't even offer them candy, bro. Children are scared of so many things. Did they just select children without behavioral issues? Not a single one of them, bar Clem, displays disobedience or fear. It's not only a stretch to believe, but for some reason this sequence is absolutely overlit as well. Just look at how dark these long shots are when compared with this absurd moonlit backlighting. And this is before the 456 has even shown up.
Everyone okay?
So is this when Jack suddenly starts to care?
Actually, we need someone who doesn't care.
Everyone okay?
I'm sorry to keep harping on about this, but was Jack really that one-track minded, caring for nothing but finding the Doctor for over a century? I highly doubt it. How did the Jack character I've come to know and love over the years be so certain that the 456 weren't just bluffing? Was the raw data genuinely enough to persuade him? I honestly never thought Jack would be this cold at this point in his timeline. Yet here we are, forced to accept that without any discussion, diplomacy, or negotiation, Jack Harkness just did what was asked of him. To throw one more spanner in the works, Jack is written as being cynical that this plan to deliver 12 children is a good idea.
What do they want them for?
They say they'll live forever.
Sure. Good night's work.
Maybe the gods were kind. Maybe they are in paradise.
No such thing.
Yet he still does it anyway. Given this idea of absolute certainty in the face of millions of human deaths, perhaps I can be a little more forgiving of Jack Harkness's involvement in this scenario. The politicians that are forced to make a decision about what is to be done to satisfy the insane demands of this unknown alien species might therefore be forgiven to some degree as well. I think the phrase, "they know not what they do," would have been a very apt title for this episode. This sequence with the cameraman was absolutely terrifying. Once again, Simon Poland does a perfect job of flooding the audience with the alien's dreaded omniscience.
Somebody is watching. Come in.
In there.
With your camera.
This slow, claustrophobic sequence that leads to the sight of a mangled child is pure horror to me. Once again, praise is due to them showing the child and not the monster itself. This kind of restraint was vital to making this villain scary. The unknown is the scariest thing in existence, and by making the 456 not just obscured visually, but not even giving it a proper name, genius. Following that, there's a lovely little discussion between Jack and Ianto where the latter sees right through Jack's BS. I really appreciated Jack's deflection here because clearly we aren't going to get a real justification as to why he didn't stand up to the 456 when he had the chance. Confessing that you're afraid to a loved one can be a seriously difficult thing to do. Ianto not only bears the weight of having a relationship with an immortal man, but to find out Jack's got a child and a grandson, like, that's a lot for a partner to swallow. And that's not the only thing Ianto was swallowing. With 10% of the world's child population now being on the table in this story, I think it's worth noting that the Earth in 2024 has accumulated over 1 billion more people since these episodes came out. That is an incomprehensibly large number, and yet it is a fact all the same. Now, take the fact that children make up roughly a quarter of the world's population today. 10% of that is still 200 million children.
Oh, we're talking millions.
Oh, but it gets worse. Let's hypothetically say that the situation presented by the 456 happens in real life. Recent surveys on the child percentages of each nation reveal that a country like South Korea would lose 1.2% of its population, whereas a country like Niger loses nearly 5% of its population. Despite South Korea having twice the population of Niger, it gives up half the amount of children that Niger does. What I'm getting at here is that no metric of fairness can be applied when it comes to the 456's demands. It's these facts that not only make the episode so scary in concept, but gives these episodes praiseworthy longevity for standing the test of time. Well, perhaps except for this hilarious camera phone and these old British pound notes. Without a single alternative to donating 10% of the Earth's child population, the government starts to plan out the logistics for meeting the 456's demands.
John?
Well, the selection's not down to me.
Nevertheless, practical solutions, please.
I don't know. Kill a kid an hour until it sorts itself out.
It leaves the decision making in the hands of people that clearly aren't qualified enough to do so. How British of the government to show this level of hubris by leaving Torchwood in ruins and UNIT in complete silence about the 456, throwing together juvenile ideas like a lottery.
It would have to be random.
No one will believe it was random, not unless some of us are seen waiting at school gates for empty buses to return. If we can't identify the lowest achieving 10% of this country's children, then what are the school league tables for?
God, this scene is absolutely incredible. This Home Secretary character Denise promoting the sacrifice of the most disadvantaged people in society, it is utterly insane. Yet, nobody else in the room has a better idea. Some might even say it's logical.
I wanted to show a government naturally and logically and deliberately deciding upon a terrible, terrible policy because they have to, because they believe it.
It's this very idea of choosing what decision would cause the least panic, the decision that would win them the most votes. That chills me to the bone. That haunting female voice singing solemnly away in the background of this scene as well, that was top notch. These scenes once again display the screenwriter's foresight when it comes to what the government would do in an emergency like this.
The inoculation programme will begin at midday, and the World Health Organization has issued a statement guaranteeing the safety and beneficial effects of the treatment.
Not only will the population be jabbed portion by portion, but also When rules are created for the masses, the government is seemingly exempt from participation in these changes.
Whatever happens, the children and grandchildren of everyone around this table will be exempt.
I think it's worth saying that regardless of which party would be in charge, they would both be at a complete loss for what to do in a situation like this.
In an age when we're terrified by the planet's dwindling resources, a reduction in the population could possibly, just possibly, if presented in the right way, be seen as good.
What an excellent decision casting Nicholas Briggs as the Foreign Secretary was as well.
During some of the rehearsals, my natural Dalek instinct did come to the fore. I had to not exterminate people, basically.
From there, Johnson and her team managed to find the Torchwood warehouse, just as Lois Abiba makes her stand.
Everything that's been said around this table, every single word spoken by every single one of you, will be made public.
Torchwood's phoenix rising from the ashes. I know I haven't been entirely on board with this character so far, but everything she's bore witness to for the benefit of Torchwood thus far makes her a worthy candidate for being the real hero of this story. In spite of some excellent editing, the order of events during the wind down of this episode seems to be rather jumbled. When I say jumbled, what I mean is that this surrender sequence
Jack Harkness, Yanto Jones. We're Torchwood.
happens before Lois says,
Right now, Captain Jack Harkness is in the reception of the MI5 building.
This begs the question, at what point were the security team and Mr. Decker given the okay to let Jack and Ianto up to the top floor? From here, the episode becomes jam-packed with detail and excitement. Gwen delivers a great ultimatum to Johnson, with Reese sitting right in front of Westminster with the laptop containing all the recordings. Like Jonathan Pye ready to hit the upload button for his latest expose, this moment was hilarious. Jack declaring war, the music soaring and tingling quietly away, then eerily returning.
Every 3 seconds, a child dies. The human response is to accept and adapt.
With the 456 finally showing its hand.
A virus has been released. It will kill everyone in the building.
Oh, and it also kills Clem. I'm sure this seemingly inexplicable moment won't become relevant in the final episode. This episode's conclusion is truly something, boys and girls. The images of countless people in Thames House dying at the door, suffocating as the score soars with tragedy, and Ianto's death, it's handled perfectly. Thanks largely to the showrunner's commitment to making Jack and Ianto a couple in this series and not just a couple of sex addicts. Just after Jack comes clean about his family, the sins of the past come to take their revenge on him in the form of losing Ianto.
You are gonna get us killed.
No, you get killed, not me. You die like a dog.
So one day you'll see me die of old age and just keep going.
Yeah.
We better make the most of it then.
1,000 years' time. You won't remember.
It's beautifully poetic. Gareth David Lloyd delivers a heartbreaking performance, convincingly fading in and out of consciousness. There's also the fact that Ianto's death isn't even a sacrifice. He's just collateral damage for going to war with the 456. In spite of everything Torchwood did, being blown up, going into hiding, the waiting, the surveillance, that singular slither of hope for humanity dashed in minutes. It all makes for a very justifiable tearjerker moment.
Drama's just not there to make you smile and go, isn't everyone happy and all the people I like have survived? That's just rubbish. The good drama actually does rip your guts out and does make you bleed.
I always felt Ianto was quite an underwritten character in series 1 and 2. Davies and co did more with him in 4 episodes than Chibnall and his crew did in 26. This episode has been sanctified in the minds of fans forever. How do I know this? Ianto's death caused fans to bring tributes to Cardiff Bay. As of 2020, the Ianto Jones Shrine was maintained for over a decade by Torchwood superfan Carol Ann Hillman. Moments after his death was broadcasted, the website Save Ianto Jones was set up and raised £1,800 to go to children in need overnight. That is the power of this episode. I only realized when the camera pulled up right here that the floor looks like a goddamn chessboard. I don't know if this was intentional, but this shot is 1 in a million. Then they cut to this shot of the 3 heads displaying no verbal response or emotional reaction. The silence is deafening. What a villain. The contrasting cold and warm bodies lays an oppressive reality to the fact that Ianto is absolutely dead. As fantastic as this final scene is, I think they could have taken it one step further by having Gwen and the soldiers wearing face masks or something. All these people were killed by a virus after all. This is followed by the closing shot of all the bodies wrapped in red. God, this episode is heavy, really heavy. The deaths, the hopelessness.
Either we go to war against an enemy we can't beat, or we go to war against our own people for their own good.
What a brilliant end to Act 2. Only a miracle can get the world out of this fix.
This is too much.
Despite this episode getting off on the wrong foot somewhat, the vast majority of this episode fully commits to what Torchwood should have been since its inception. I give Day 4 an 8 out of 10.